What's up, everyone? Welcome back to another episode of Clarke Notes. Welcome to May's edition, I guess, as we kind of wrap up the school year. Honestly, everyone's been saying about it. I legitimately cannot believe that we're already at the end of another school year. And now I'll be going into the end of year 5 for me. And it just feels like yesterday that I was given my first ever substitute slip that said Mr. Clarke on it. And one thing that people kind of look at education and just kind of think like, oh, you get to retire early and like there's a lot of good benefits with teaching. But one thing that has really kind of made an impact on me, when your father dies at a young age, it does a weird thing to you where you don't quite, like, you no longer see yourself living to old age. Like, my dad died when he was 50, and now I'm turning 28 here in a few weeks. And in my mind, I automatically kind of go to, oh, like, I only have 22 years left. Like, that's kind of the new way that my mind connects with longevity. And in my mind, I'm like, okay, if I've already done 5 years in education, then really that only means I have to do that 4 more times, and then my life is over. That sounds very morbid, but it is definitely it's probably unhealthy. Probably need some more therapy for that in that regard, but it's definitely something where if I don't feel like I'm doing exactly what I should be doing, everything feels like it's falling behind. And so I guess all I'm saying is, for that is, as another school year kind of comes to an end, I feel like in this type of profession, you get so many more almost like mandatory periods of reflection, where if you're teaching in a high school, I mean, you get the exam period after first semester. You get the end of the summer when you're kind of wrapping up the second round of report cards, and you get the summer to kind of debrief, recover, relax, and learn potentially and do some reading. But yeah, I feel like coming into the end of year 5, turning, 28, it's not old. I know that's not old, but again, Mr. Clarke After Dark is brought to you by Lean Fit Supplements. Teachers, you give everything to your students, your time, your energy, and even your sanity. But who is fueling you? Lean Fit is here to help you stay energized, focused, and feeling your best, whether you're powering through lesson plans or just surviving recess. From clean protein powders to daily wellness boosters and my personal favorite, the vanilla protein, Lean Fit has your back. Click the link in the description to get 25% off your first order today. Mr. Clarke After Dark is brought to you by Luxy. That's Luxy. Luxy is the standard for modern dating, as it gives you a greater understanding of any potential match's intentions and background before you make your move. Swiping endlessly in other dating apps can be exhausting and often leave you with only the leftovers in your dating pool. Luxy is an exclusive platform with just a 10 to 15% acceptance rate, as well as a profile and income verification feature, so you can be confident you're only connecting with those who meet your high standards. The community guidelines emphasize safety, trust, and equality by strictly prohibiting scams, explicit content, and harassment. 2025 is your year to stop settling. With Luxy, there is no luck involved, just real connections with people who truly match what it is you are looking for. Download the Luxy app today to see if you qualify for a better chance at finding the right person for you. And now, back to the show. And to kind of add another tidbit onto that point, I mean, my dad was first diagnosed with cancer when he was 45. So in my mind, I'm like, okay, that's only 17 years away for me, to kind of put myself into that same category. And that would mean that I would only do what I've kind of done 3 more times until really the bulk of my career is done or over. So I think that comes from a healthy place of wanting to make impact. And honestly, yeah, I think a lot of people think that teachers go into teaching to find like a job that's chill, but I think that's not the case whatsoever. I kind of need to be kind of always busy and on the go. So maybe I'll come back to regret those words depending on what position, if I am offered a position next year. I mean, obviously, hopefully. I think that when I first did my first few practicums in middle schools, I genuinely enjoyed the weirdness of it. Like, I remember my grade 8s at McTavish, who would actually be graduating this year from McTavish. I loved how it was a bit more easygoing in the sense of there was no necessarily like academic pressure to really like force down the students. Grades 7 and 8 and 6 are just, like, grade 6 almost still feels like elementary school to me. Like, they're kind of just getting into the rhythm of middle school. But grades 7 and 8 are such dumpster fire years where you like classroom management protocols. I mean, it doesn't even, there is no system that can perfectly calm down a grade 8 classroom, as we've been learning in May. I don't know what the switch was, because also teaching high school for a few years, I am not used to having a full year with a group. And I didn't this year. I'm not a classroom teacher this year, but being able to help out in classes this year, May 1st, like I remember I was talking to a teacher I was with in their classroom, and I went and talked to my principal, and I didn't even know what I was asking. I walked in and I was like, you know what, man? I don't even know what's happening. Some sort of switch has flipped. Everyone, it almost seems like everyone in every class in middle school anyway is like, it's like they're so fed up with each other that they're just trying to subtly find ways to piss people off, which is like in my kid brain kind of hilarious. But at the same time, when you're the one adult or one of just a couple adults that's responsible for maintaining order and trying to prevent that from happening, it's just like it's like playing whack-a-mole. I'm trying to think of like a better example. It's like whack-a-mole on steroids, but like the stick you're given is actually the size of a pen, and the moles are like the size of lamps. There's just a lamp here. I don't know, but it's just nothing you do is working. There is no like, no, like do a token system or do like penalties on the board or like class pizza day. Like none of that is going to work. There's just something that they're just not. School is done in their mind. So yeah, it's something I definitely won't miss about middle school if I do go on to teach high school again next year again. That's a lot of things happening in New Brunswick, a lot of the stuff with the budget, if anyone's paying attention to that. So I mean, who knows where I'll be next year. I definitely think I'll be in a classroom again, but and we'll kind of, I'm hoping to actually, one of the conversations I had with one of our coaches here was like, once you kind of have a year outside of the classroom, especially in resource, when you start to, from what I have learned this year, like the little ways that you can potentially help the students that aren't fully up to grade level that are in your class, you have a bit more of an idea of what the support looks like for them, so that when you kind of are faced with that student of like, oh, I mean, my tier 1 instruction is not going to reach the student, but now I don't know what to do. I do think I at least know who the people are and the conversations to have and the type of capacity that they have to actually help that student. So I think that's definitely helpful in something that I've learned for kind of reverting back to the classroom. And so yeah, I think obviously a high school position teaching modern history would be pretty much the bread and butter for myself. So I think that could be fun to do next year as well. But I think one thing I'm learning about myself, because I made a reel a few days ago, because I'm really trying to become more cringy. I know that's something that's kind of frowned upon, but I think being cringe is fringe. I just came out on the spot, like I just don't even know. And fringe is where new things are created. So I think that's something I would like to do more. So I think, and there's a lot of educators that post kind of funny TikTok reels and Instagram reels. So I'm trying to dabble in that in a sense that's not actually just me copying or being a good plagiarizer. But I'd definitely like to expand my social media presence a bit more, because I find even all the educator podcasters that I've spoken to, I mean, education reels don't really perform that well. And again, it's not like we're doing this for the millions of views. They'd be cool, but I mean, when you post a reel that you think is really good and it gets like 111 views, you're like, okay, like maybe there's different things that can serve the investment you put of your time into that social media sphere. Another thing I've learned about myself is I absolutely cannot stand fiction. I've been so jealous of my wife these past few like the past month or so, and because she's just been reading nonstop. She found the new book series she loves, and she's just been crushing books like crazy. And to me, I wish, like, I love to read, but I have this weird idea that like if I'm reading, I have to be reading in a way that is in service of whatever my future potential teaching might be. So every time I need to read, I need to feel like, okay, I need to read a history book that's about like some weird subsection of Stalin or Hitler. And then it's like, I'll never read another fiction book again. My sister-in-law was nice enough to give me a few books, and one of them was Stephen King. And like, I opened it up and I just like, I have no interest. And that's even someone who's an English minor. And weirdly enough, I enjoyed all my English courses when I took them and the readings I had to do. But even at 23 years old and doing a Shakespeare English like major course, I still would pick the shortest plays to write my papers on because I was just like, I can't handle this. Like, it's not even like it's imaginative. It's just almost like I can't. It just feels like wasted time to me. Maybe that's the point. Maybe it's supposed to be enjoyable and kind of let your imagination run. But for myself, I just can't quite get there. And I think too, as I am only 13 weeks away, I mean, knock on wood, hopefully everything all goes well from having my first child. So a little bit nervous, definitely, about getting to the end of August, starting in a new teaching position, potentially. Again, I know. I feel like even me saying that sounds like I'm trying to leave my school. Promise that's not the case whatsoever. It's just, it's a weird place to be in, coming from a place where you have a permanent contract and going to a place where you have to kind of start over on the temporary ones where you just never know what kind of gig or assignment you'll be given for the following year. Mr. Clarke After Dark is also brought to you by leverageassistance.com. What could you do if you had a free full-time personal employee for your small business for a whole month? Whether you're an education consultant, solopreneur, or just building an ed tech startup or have a separate small business of your own, you understand how a great idea can turn into a litter of monotonous tasks. Creating content, managing clients, pitching new work, and then somehow still answering emails is just too much for one person. That is where Leverage Assistance comes into play. They give you highly vetted, full-time business operations specialists for just $3,000 a month with no hidden fees. That's less than a third of the cost of hiring one full-time employee to do anything that you need to customize to your business needs. Each assistant is put through a 12-hour vetting process with reference checks, AI tools training, and a behavioral fit assessment. You're not just hiring help, you're gaining a strategic partner. Try it for free at leverageassistance.com. That's leverageassistance.com in the description below. Focus on your zone of genius and let them handle the rest. And I do think that I will take another year, kind of learn more of the ropes here in New Brunswick. I've found it fascinating how much is actually different, even though like it's still in Canada, it's still a provincial education system. It's a curriculum of mostly the same things as Alberta would have had, except I guess like slightly different idiosyncrasies based on like the cultural context of the immediate environment and the immediate area. But yes, I'm just still learning a lot about like how even like one to kind of fit in, I guess, if that's a weird way to say it, or like kind of learning the ways, or I guess learning how the game is played, if you will. Yeah, so I think another year to kind of figure that out and try to work through that. But I also found out that the University of New Brunswick, as far as I know, offers fully online master's programs now. I was under the impression that it was only going to be MUN, and that's where I had planned on going. But obviously, if I'm in New Brunswick and UNB offers that program, I remember my first year teaching, I had a VP tell me, like I had a conversation about like what I was doing in my classroom, what I had done with like my PLPs and things I was doing. And the person I was talking to just chuckled and looked at me and they're like, Lucas, when are you going to start your master's of education and to like be a vice principal and principal and all that stuff? And I felt like super flattered, whatever. And I was like, oh, that's so nice of them to say. And I think initially at that point, I was like, yeah, like I want to be a principal, like I want to move up in the district and I want to like try to guide change. And I do think the beer goggles kind of go away after a bit, where it just feels like so much extra pressure. And I know it's not like people don't do it for a raise to go into administration, but it just seems like the pressure is so overbearing for a lot of those administrators. But I do think I'm starting to rediscover, in a sense, a wanting to understand how education systems operate and adapt to change within their given environment. Now, that sounds very vague, but I've kind of come across like a lane of comparative education. And what I do think would genuinely be interesting is trying to learn about, like, for example, why is Finland's system always talked so highly of? Why is Japan's system always talked so highly of? Why is the US always talked so poorly of? And Canada seems to kind of always be in the middle. Like, again, the US has the Department of Education. Canada has no such thing, where we have provincial government. So I just think it's very interesting to me why, I mean, most of education, for the most part, is citizenship reading, and mathematics. So I would like to learn more about how those kind of different systems kind of have come to be, how they've kind of responded to kind of historical change. And I guess what changes are they currently making, especially in the past 10 years, to go from, an increase in technology to post-COVID to artificial intelligence. I think seeing how, like, what systems are more adept to enacting change in a positive way than others. So that kind of falls under like the leadership in a sense, where I think I would like to eventually, like 10, 20 years from now, be working in a district and trying to be the person who's kind of looking at all these other jurisdictions for education and trying to implement these ideas and filter out the bad ideas of how to kind of slowly overhaul and implement long-term change for like a 10-year plan. So I think that is something I'm interested in. Kind of blends all like my weird social studies interests and everything into one. And I think it also opens the door for leadership in the future. I think that what I try to do with this podcast is I try to create an environment for leadership ideas to be shared. Whether or not that's from me actually sitting in the vice principal or the principal chair one day remains to be seen, as I think I'm horrible with spreadsheets and anything that's actually like any sort of paperwork that other people depend on me for, which I used to be really good at, which I find now I just don't have the same. It's probably just laziness with getting older or becoming complacent, which is its own flaw for myself that I know I have to work on. But it's just something I don't feel is my strongest suit. And I know even George Koros was on here talking about like him and his VPs when he was a principal. They would always kind of shake up the duties and that kind of make sure each one are kind of different from one another, so they each kind of complement the different parts of that role. Because I do think that I would be more of a, if I was had to be a principal tomorrow in a school, I would say my plan for that school is to not have a plan for that school and just try to let the teachers kind of bring it from the ground up. And I kind of see it as like a, not leading from in front and looking ahead and not knowing who's falling behind, but kind of leading from behind and kind of watching as maybe the sheep fall behind and you're kind of herding. That's kind of the way I view education and leadership anyway. So yeah, I think comparative education, learning about different international systems, I think potentially that could open up a possibility for travel in the future to do research as well, which I think could be really cool. But again, a lot of things in the air with potentially a new school and starting a family here in the next 3 months. So a few things on hold there for now. I wouldn't say for too much longer. So that's kind of, I guess, my 3-year plan. I think for sure I'll be doing the podcast throughout this summer, and I think even into next year, even though I'm at a new school and having a child and starting a family. I think what the podcast will look like for the summer is I actually only post 5 times a month right now. And in the summer, I plan on posting 8 times, but with no specifically new episodes. I think I've seen a few other podcasts do something similar where they post like an essentials episode. So these episodes are like 1.5 to 2 hours. They actually post like a 25-minute version of them. So I think I'll go through, find some of my longer ones, and I'm actually going to post 8 essentials videos. So I'll post 1 per week for 2 months. And so yeah, so that'll be 4 episodes a month. I might even post 16. I might do 2 a month. I might do something along that line, but there will be no new content per se. But it could be more accessible, and it could actually be, if you have been someone that's been listening to a lot of them in the past, it could actually be the best, most impactful, valuable information of what you're actually looking for from that person. And maybe you only listened to the first 15, 20 minutes and there was things that were toward the end that I thought were great. I'm going to kind of shake that up and post those throughout the summer. As for the fall, I'll be back to kind of posting, I think 4 episodes a month. I think 5, again, new school, having a child, I think might not be the most attainable. I do think, I can record 3 podcasts in a couple days fairly easily, pre-scheduled. So I think I can make that work for next year. But I think a monthly Clarke Notes, doing a few new episodes, kind of the readjustment from middle school back to high school, and my advice for that, I think could be potentially some good lanes for content or for kind of keeping the podcast fresh. And so yeah, so that's the summer. Essentials episodes in the fall, kind of back to regularly scheduled programming. For the next month, I'll be hitting episode 100, which I remember 2.5 years ago, walking around Fort McMurray and having this idea of like, you know what? I think I'm like an education podcast where I talk to teachers about their life and just kind of get to know them on a deeper level would be so fun to do. I remember feeling so excited and just wanting to try it. And now here we are, 100 episodes in. I thought it would feel like different or cooler, but it is pretty cool. I mean, I'm definitely very proud of the investment I've made of trying to not just start something and just do like a few things and be like, oh, like that was fun. But now I'm here kind of 2 years in. I mean, I've had brand deals where I've been able to do advertising for people. So, I mean, that's something I never thought would ever come to fruition. So there's been a lot of cool things that kind of come with the podcast. And to finish off here for the Clarke notes, one thing I kind of want to start doing is unpacking, I guess, conventional things that people take as truth about education. And one thing I've slowly learned about education is that some of the things that, like one of the quotes I like is that some things need to be experienced to be learned. And I think that in education, so much of the generic stuff feels so generic. And what I mean by generic would be like student discipline. Like I almost feel like the ways you go about doing it don't necessarily change over time. And it just seems so straightforward. Like, okay, no, you stay consistent, you have a couple rules, and then if a student breaks them, you send them out. Like it's not really rocket science. Like there's not really like these levels of discipline that you learn over time. I think what you do learn over time is just being more consistent because you just realize that the fight is worth having earlier on. I mean, emphasis on fight there, but I think that would be like a common truth where it's like every teacher kind of knows that, and there's not really any nuance you can add to it, but you still get better at doing it. And so one of the things that I've come across is that like we've had conversations in my family and with my siblings and with my in-laws, like, do you send kids to private school or not, or to a charter school? And I think one of the myths that kind of comes up that I was kind of, when I was doing some research, is that like private and charter schools do not necessarily guarantee better outcomes for learners, which I thought was interesting. And I think even speaking with Aaron Schreier, who, I mean, Maxwell is our future son, has a spot at the Origins Early Learning Education Center, who I'm not affiliated with, but I had Aaron Schreier on as a guest. I found it so refreshing that even she said to me, like, not all the students that go through her school are necessarily like better, or that they're not necessarily like, they're still, some of them could still have learning issues. They might get that higher targeted support from having like a 1-on-10 ratio versus a 1-on-29, but there's still going to be students that can go through that system and still have issues learning. So I do think that it was refreshing to hear someone who is a head of schools for a private school actually kind of have that perspective. One thing for myself, especially that I will be becoming a parent, is special education services means that my child is falling behind. I genuinely think that in education and in teaching, there's almost this weird, like everyone will say, oh, like it's so important to get a good education. But when the teacher actually wants to educate the student, there can be backlash. And especially being someone who understands or has been a part of the process of how do you, like, you're not diagnosing students with anything, but you're trying to figure out which student needs a referral for additional support. And I just feel like it all kind of comes down to, like, I think of like a hockey reference. It's like, it's not even that your kid just might need a different type of hockey stick or like a different blade, for example. That was kind of the way I look at it. It's like everyone kind of has the same tools, but maybe they actually kind of need to learn how to use those tools in a different way that they might not have known before. So I think that's something for me that I found. Like, I have actually noticed in another way that a lot of teachers' students that I work with, so if I work with a teacher, their child almost always has like a PLP or like an individualized learning plan, because if anything, they're kind of more of an advocate for that support. They might be a bit more sensitive to seeing things in their kid that they see in others, so they want that support. For the most part, like, what does it mean to need that support versus kind of want that support, I think are two different things. One of the things that we had a struggle with in Alberta, for example, was you can't give everyone a quiet space. When, like, it was kind of hilarious. Like if you had an accommodation for a quiet space for a final exam or a diploma, we would put you into the quiet space room. And now ideally this room would have maybe 10 kids in it, all not looking at each other. And it was that was it. Like you just had a quieter space. And eventually the quiet space room had 35 kids in it. So you're literally just writing in a weird way, probably even worse, because now you're writing with kids that hate noise. So they might be thinking about it, being self-conscious about it. And honestly, at the end of the day, it was like we were talking like just bring earplugs. Like there's not enough room to kind of withstand that many requests. This kind of brought me back to another point because I was speaking with someone close to me recently, and they were talking about what's going on in Alberta with the ATA and the potential call for a strike here in the next, likely in the fall, if that's what they decide to do. And he said, are teachers greedy? Like, is that like, do they just keep wanting more money, or like, what is this also about now? I've obviously just did a teacher pay episode recently of some ideas that could potentially be of use. Who knows? But I do think that, especially in Alberta's case, where you have no limits on class sizes or acknowledgement of class composition complexity, as one of the things contributing to teachers not wanting to be in the profession. I think that's what it comes down to, is having one teacher with 37 students and 42 students. And I think one even had 54, which I thought there was at least a maximum. If there's no minimum, maybe at least have like a maximum of 35. Yeah, so that's kind of been the interesting part about, does a private or charter school actually lead to better outcomes? Even those that own those schools don't necessarily think that's the case. Just because someone says your child needs support, does that mean they're falling behind? No. I think for the most part, I guess maybe like even after COVID, like right now, a lot of the times we're kind of like figuring out who didn't learn what and when. And that's a very delicate dance of what you're trying to figure out with all these kids, because they also don't know what they don't know. And when your child is kind of put on the radar of the ESS team or like a support team, it's never from a place of like, oh, this is because they are less than. It's like, no, they could actually really benefit from, like, honestly, making sure you're hitting like these 3 or 4 nuanced like reading areas that you just didn't read when you were in grade 3. Maybe you had COVID for the month and you had to quarantine. You missed that for those few weeks. Like, it really is very prescribed. A lot of the intervention that does take place. So I guess my thought would always be, always encourage your students, your kids to be assessed. Always encourage additional support. If I ever get an email about my child having to get an assessment or kind of get anything done, I will never bat an eye. I do think that is very important. But so yeah, thank you so much. I did have some other things planned for going into trust-based observations with Craig Randall, but I will pick that up on the episode after episode 100. I'll kind of do like a 10 lessons learned from 100 episodes on Mr. Clarke After Dark. Thank you all so much, as always, for listening. Please do not forget to subscribe, like, share, do whatever you want to do. And as always, thanks for listening.